without further ado, we are going to kickstart our first session this morning. This is the media strategy agony aunts. Ask me anything. So I hope you've got lots of questions ready for our agony aunts and uncle this morning. Because they're here to try and answer all those difficult questions in what is increasingly becoming a very complex media and advertising landscape, which we love because obviously we can then put these events on for you. So I'm not going to make all the introductions of these people. You can see them on stage, but I am going to welcome them all up onto stage now. So please give them a warm welcome, along with our very own Jack Benjamin from the Media Leader, who will make the introductions. Give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Got enough seats here yet? Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm a reporter for the Media Leader. My name's Jack Benjamin. Hopefully I get to meet all of you if I haven't met you previously. We're trying something new with this breakfast briefing. We have never done an agony aunts thing before, so we'll see how it goes. Ideally, you won't hear from me very much at all because you in the crowd will be asking questions. We're looking for basically questions about media strategy and planning. What are the big challenges that you guys are facing that our experts on stage might be able to help you out with, or certainly address some of the challenges that are coming up. That said, I do have some questions prepared as well that have been provided. And I want to start with one question, and if we could go down the line essentially and just introduce yourself, what you do, and sorry, Jack, you're going to have to go first for this one. So, hi, agony aunts. I have an AV budget of £500,000 and I want to spend it as effectively as possible. Normally, we'd put all this into linear and BVOD, but we keep hearing that linear audiences are declining. How would you recommend we spend our budget? Jackie, why don't you start?
Thanks, Jack. So I would respond with loads of questions because I don't know who they're trying to reach. So the brief is bad. Who are they trying to reach? Who's your audience? First question.
Let's say it's a younger audience.
Oh, okay, younger audience. What's the objective of the campaign? Good question. We have to tease all this out because depending on the information we get, obviously, as planners, the response, rightly so, will be very, very different. So let's say it's a younger audience, and is it a big brand campaign, a sale, a product launch?
Big brand campaign.
Big brand campaign, okay. 500K?
Yeah.
It's light enough now. We've got another problem. So 500K, how long should it be running for? Or would you like us to tell you?
I would like you to tell me.
Okay, great. Well, I'd say for 500, you'd be looking probably at a burst. So it would probably be a burst. You'd talk about getting some data involved then. So we need to profile where those younger audiences are obviously spending time with media. We'd look at the cost profile of all the channels involved. So a media planner's jobs, everybody in the room will be aware, is to balance cost and reach and try and get to the right optimal mix. I would throw in attention at this point because especially if it's a brand campaign, I think it's definitely worth including attention metrics in your planning. And all of those things combined would give you the exact mix of, would give you probably a pointed view more towards BVOD and other digital video. You'd be looking at CTV as part of the mix. Probably cinema would be something for a younger audience I would include as well. And then there'd be a question on social media and seeing what the right way to build that in would be, because the attention metrics would tell us that depending on which format you use, you'll have a wider or lower attention capacity to deliver. And for a brand campaign, the longer watch time you have of your content, the greater the impact on memory structures, which is the whole point of the brand campaign, and recall. So that has to be factored in. So I'd say avoid feeds and go for your reels, basically, on social. And then you'll be in a good spot. And we can't forget YouTube. That would have a strong power on a younger audience.
Mm. Amy, what about you? Anything to add? And I should note, you're the head of media strategy and planning at Boots.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say that.
Yeah, that's okay, Jack. Everyone knows who you are. But
So hopefully I'd be giving you a better brief than that.
Yes, you would, of course.
I would.
Yeah.
So I'd give you all the audience, etc. But I think I would also, ultimately, I would be saying to the agency, look, I've made a beautiful AV asset. I would lead with AV, not TV. I'd say I've made this asset. It's 30 seconds long. It looks beautiful. I want as many people to see this and engage with it. So all I care about is that it's going to be in the right environment. It's going to be on a big screen, ideally. It's going to have that co-viewing behavior. It's going to have eyeballs on it. So ultimately, I kind of leave it to the agency to say, if you can find those high attention, high dwell time formats, on a big screen, it's up to you. And I do think that would tell me, yep, that linear would be there. I think there's absolutely a role. But I like to think there would be other AV assets. You talked about cinema, you talked about YouTube. I'd imagine all of that would come out so long as you then put those quality controls underneath it. So I think that's really important from a client perspective. What is your end goal? And then let the agency sort of guide you to that solution. And of course, I would also be saying, but what's worked well in the past? Because you've got to do a little bit of that. So we're very lucky to have very robust sort of measurement frameworks at Boots, thanks to all the data we've got. So if you overlay a little bit of what's worked well, but also where it was changing, how is viewing behaviour changing, a little bit of looking back, a little bit of looking forward, overlay it with some nice attention, and I think you would get to a good place.
Raj, what do you think about linear versus everything else in AV?
Absolutely. Morning everyone, I'm Raj, Director of Client Partnerships at MIQ. It's a really, really interesting question. I think this idea of over-investment into linear, and I think we can all acknowledge like viewing habits are changing. I look at my own viewing habits. The only things I really watch live anymore are kind of sport and The Traitors recently, just because I couldn't deal with any spoilers in the morning. So like, I think we all have this gut feel that actually just investing loads into linear probably isn't the right thing to do. I think what maybe the problem has been is that the data availability and the tech hasn't quite caught up and had that granularity and that accessibility to make those decisions quickly and actually see it in front of you. It's quite a timely question. This is a challenge that MIQ have been looking at for a while, and we did actually sort of recently launch a TV intelligence platform. I promise I won't talk about MIQ the whole time, but I think now with these advancements that there are generally in data, there you can actually go in and see what is the frequency that I've been hitting on my linear TV. You can look at under-indexing audiences around geos, audiences, that kind of thing. I think when you've got that data and it's clearly in front of you, you can start saying, well, what we're starting to see is that maybe the top 20% of linear audiences that you're hitting are seeing the ad 15, 20, 30 times. Your bottom 20% are seeing it maybe once. So you get this sort of like distorted frequency curve. When you can see the data in front of you, this question becomes a lot easier to answer. So maybe the challenge might be, let's look at the data. Maybe you take that top 100K of your 500K and think, well, actually, could I look at the under-indexing areas around geos, audiences, and put that into a CTV and a YouTube campaign? And you can start distributing your investment in a more sort of balanced way to kind of mitigate that. So that would be how we'd look at it. Essentially, I think a lot of these things, there's data developments. If we can keep an eye on those, I think we can use them effectively.
I want to open it up. I mean, I'm happy to ask lots of questions, but in the audience, just raise your hand and we'll have a roving mic in case anyone has a question for any of these folks. Otherwise, I'll continue. Got a question all the way in the back? Yeah?
That was really interesting from all of you, actually. Thank you so much. But I just wanted to ask, in terms of, obviously a lot of this is to do with TV and online and social. What about adding in like some of the high attention channels like out-of-home links? Does that help at all? Like for branding? Oh, sorry. Was that loud enough?
Yeah.
Adding in out of home, is that what you said?
So the question is, what about other high attention platforms like out of home?
So if our objective was a brand campaign and you have more money than 500, potentially, and it's definitely an option. For me, if the brand campaign is about eliciting an emotional response, although outdoor is really powerful, and I'm a big outdoor fan, I think video content will do a better job at that. So that would be my first channel to invest in, and I'd do that properly. And if you have money left over, absolutely. Outdoor ads impact. If you get an agency to crack brilliant creative, it's a different ballgame. I find sometimes outdoor creative comes like Paddy last, and therefore it can sometimes lose the resonance that it needs to have. So on its own as a channel, for your brand, like say repositioning or something, you'd have to be amazing creative. But as a backup with and a multiplier effect to video, then definitely, if you can afford it.
I think it's how you're buying it as well, isn't it? Because I think there's some brilliant work I've seen recently about sort of signalling strength, and it's almost like what are you saying as a brand without actually having to say it, just by being on that iconic out-of-home site in a high footfall area with some beautiful creative. So I think if you can get into those premium formats, I think there's definitely a role for it on the plan.
Yeah.
Likewise, I think we're doing way more at Boots with sort of dynamic out-of-home, because we find that's when you've got a lot of products, you've got a lot of different pricing messages, you've got lots of different stuff to communicate. Dynamic allows you to do it quite seamlessly and react to what's going on. So there's almost two different ways we could approach out of home, and we're doing a little bit of both at Boots, yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that last point on, as a programmatic company, I guess we're biased more towards the digital out of home and the accessibility and the just the granularity in which you can target. So I think firstly, you can make your budget work harder. You don't, you can target in specific areas, specific times of day, that kind of thing. And I think absolutely that when you can make the creative relevant to where you are, what time of day, all that kind of thing, you will just get kind of better cut through. I suppose the measurement side of things is obviously a little bit more tricky, but digital out of home is natural. Well, any out of home is inherently regional based, so you can start to do these sort of like geo uplift tests potentially. So that might be the challenge on that, but yeah, there's some really cool things you could do with out of home now.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions out in the audience? Yeah, we've got one right here. Sorry, I'm making Steve run all the way around the room.
Oh, hi, it's Simon Redican. This might be a mischievous question nowadays, but what are the panel's favourite ad campaign at the moment?
Oh, that's a good question.
Okay,
Who wants to start?
Do you want me to go first?
go on then.
Yeah.
I do.
That's all you have to say.
I'm not sure. I'd really like more time to think about it. But
I
however,
suspect everyone in the room would be thinking the same thing.
there is there's a brand that we're speaking to at the moment. Very sort of subversive alcohol brand, like 19 Crimes, and like we were speaking to them, and they've just got this whole kind of vehicle of sort of do this or don't. It's kind of like challenge your behaviours. And in fact, the way they're sort of buying media and the creative that they deliver, they're trying to do it in this quite subversive way. I just think that's really cool. And they're not the biggest of brands, but they're trying to own certain spaces. So special product launches around Halloween for this cool sort of like glow in the dark wine bottle. I just think that's a really nice thing, how you can add sort of punch with a fairly limited budget. I just like the sort of branding that they're doing. And also Boots, obviously, is. So, yeah.
After Boots, we've just been talking out of home, so I don't know if you were thinking this time with British Airways. I think the work they've done recently in out of home. Quickly got in there. I think is brilliant. I think how they've taken a core lead execution and then delivered that in different environments with something so simple, something very, very brave. I don't know how many marketers here would be brave enough to have an out-of-home poster that has simply got some windows on a plane and their logo. So I think it's brave. It shows so much about the brand in very little, very simple creative, put in really beautiful placements. So that's one for me.
Did you see when the fake news EasyJet?
EasyJet, very clever. Maybe they should be. Maybe that could be yours.
Mine was the EasyJet fake campaign. I was genuinely going to say that one. What else is really good at the moment? I think there's a lot of broader work. I'm not sure if they're on air right now, but I'm a big fan of the Yorkshire Tea's work in the last couple of months too. I think going back to what you stand for as a brand and living that through AV, seeing as we're talking about video, is brilliant work. Simple, straightforward, but very, very clever, and it's going to work when you see it. It's not just an advertising perspective. You can feel the consumers are going to latch on. So I think that's a brand doing good stuff.
Nice. Great question. I've got another question here. Says, our CMO says his daughter is on TikTok all the time and wants us to increase spend on the platform, even though it doesn't make sense for every campaign. How do you push back against me search coming from leadership? Who wants to start with that one? Amy, why don't you
start that one. It's a fair question, and I think you want to know that people are watching your ads. So if you've got someone sat next to you saying, "Why am I not seeing your Boots ad, Daddy? What's going on?" He's right to ask. I think we have to. We're so lucky at Boots. We sit on so much data. We've got a lot of data there to say what's working and what's no. I won't talk about TikTok specifically, but we've got so many data points that we can go off to say, there's opportunity here, there's headroom. Yes, it aligns with our audience. Yes, the econometrics it's saying it's working. We'll probably have a direct conversation with a partner to say, can we do some incrementality testing? So there's all these ways that we can use data to help inform. I'm a big data person, so I'll always put that at the heart. I think it makes for a much easier conversation. But I think it's staying true to what you want to do, what's the objective, all the stuff we talked about earlier. Is it actually going to deliver on all your objectives? So always open. I think the worst thing you can do is shut it down and saying, no, I've tried it, it didn't work. That's absolutely not the way to go. It's definitely a conversation and probing a little bit of why. what do you want to get out of it, and having those open conversations. So.
The one build I'd have on TikTok is you need a very distinctive approach to show it properly on that platform. So, for some brands, it's the complete right environment, and you have the right tone of voice and authenticity baked into your creative. If you just have a video asset and you're going to pop it on the channel, you're not going to get the same response. So I think TikTok's one of those platforms where you need to have a strategy to activate it in the first instance, rather than just being an add-on, to be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just sort of don't mind it a little bit that we're being challenged based on what people are seeing in the real world, because we might just get used to running the same platforms and all this. So I think, actually, if that is happening in the real world, I would say, just because someone's absorbing something doesn't always mean it's the best advertising opportunity. So I think that's where you can lean on partners. And exactly as you said, Amy, around a data-driven approach, should be a wealth of learnings around, what's that going to look like. You're not really making these decisions blind, so you can take that kind of thing, but then you should be able to get a pretty reasonable idea of what that campaign might deliver, what the benchmarks might be, all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think generally, I actually don't mind being challenged on that. I think sometimes when a brand's we've had a couple who are we haven't seen our ads. And I'm well, the campaign's targeting students. You shouldn't see the ads. It'd be bad if you did. And so there's been a couple of those. But yeah, so that's what I'd say. Use the data.
Any questions in the audience? Ooh, we got two. Let's go closer to the front. You don't have to run so much. Yeah.
Hi, Rupen from Thinkbox. You mentioned in the first response how attention should be factored into the brief, and I just wondered, based on some research we've done, we've seen that there's a lot of focus on visual attention, but auditory attention is arguably more important. So I just wondered how Boots and the brands that you represent are evolving their approach to auditory attention and the value of that. You can't turn your ears off, whereas you can divert your eyes or look away.
Sure.
I'll be honest, I don't think, I'm pleased you prompted it, and I won't refer to our head of measurement and effectiveness, who is in the audience today. We'll be speaking to you later, but we probably haven't done enough in the space of auditory attention. I'm first to put my hands up, and I'd love to talk about that one some more.
We work with Lumen, and it's their next area that they're focusing on. They haven't it's not fully, their data isn't fully shared yet. They've been working in pockets with clients, and it's kind of coming, if that makes sense. But a lot of the same reasons that visual attention cuts through and holds better, it's similar from an auditory perspective, in that it's about relevance and context and the ability to skip on. So things like podcasts do very well because people lean in and they're listening to content that they want to do. We've done our own actual research in this space as well, from a Havas perspective. I think the bit that hasn't been properly overlaid and is hard to stack up in media plans is the power of the overspill of visual channels and their audio properties too. So you tend to look at audio on its own and video on its own, and the grey area in between is where it gets blurry. So Spotify have a ton of video assets. So are you buying it as an audio platform or a video platform? You know what I mean? And then for passive consumption of TV, we know the power of it is also, as you say, rightly so, and I've seen your research, we've had you into our forum, is in that extra benefit of if somebody's just flicking the kettle on, they can still hear the ads, and that has a benefit too. It's really hard to quantify that in a reach curve because it's like an additional benefit. So I think you have to just take it into account as a planner rather than, at the moment, we don't have that science to knit it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something personally I've seen a huge amount on. I suppose our approach is that we're the more activational end of running campaigns. I think we remain agnostic in terms of who we work with. So I think we just have teams that keep up to date with the attention specialists who will see what's available, keep an eye on their developments. And I suppose it's our responsibility to manage that whole, there's so many partners for a particular brand to speak to. That's what we do. We can speak to all of the different sort of partners, see what the developments are and understand when to put them on campaigns. We have attention tracking as standard on all of our campaigns now, so we can start getting benchmarks, and we can do that for auditory as well moving forward. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. I'll definitely chat to our product teams after this.
Mm-hmm. There's another question in the back. Can we get yakety sax to get played while?
Oh yeah.
Morning. I have a question around like, you know, the previous question was around TikTok, this new sort of generation, or Gen Z as it were. What are some of the challenges that you're finding with some of the brands that obviously want to speak to this audience? But like you said, Jackie, I loved how you said you need a specific sort of, if you're going to be on TikTok, you need a really impactful strategy. So what are the challenges you're finding for older sort of gen brands wanting to speak to this new audience, and how are you overcoming those challenges and still delivering them a campaign that speaks to that audience and lets that audience engage with them?
So I have an example just popped into my head. It's not a Havas client, actually. It's because I was a judge for TikTok last year, and a brand that I thought did this pretty well is M&S. So they would be obviously famous for their delicious ads and their subtle voices and all that stuff. And they're on TV, they're reaching a broad audience. But on TikTok, they show up with a very different personality. And they hand off to, sometimes it's their staff in store, it's a lot of Percy Pig, it's very irreverent. And I think that's a really smart way of thinking of your whole ecosystem of touch points and key brand assets, and deciding, how can I stretch here in a credible way, in a way that will still feel authentic to a Gen Z audience, but that wouldn't alienate somebody else who might see it. So I think that's just a brand that does it quite well. It's a tricky one, though, of course, trying to be broad and super relevant. So, I mean, that must be a Boots.
Yeah, 100%. Because I guess we massively broad. Can you hear me okay? This is just falling off. I'll do this on the fly. Is that all right? You can hear me? Brilliant. Massively broad audience. So we've got one end of the spectrum. We've got a sort of a younger beauty audience that they're getting all of their inspiration from TikTok now. So whether that's product, whether it's Derm Talk, which is their new skincare regime, will all come from TikTok. But at the same time, there's a lot of crap out there that's not true, and we can kind of be the trusted voice to cut through that. So that's a role for comms from a Boots perspective, to be that trusted, credible, we've been on the high street for 175 years, that credible voice. And the same on the other side of the things with our healthcare proposition, where we are going after probably a slightly older audience. But again, that audience is still going to TikTok to remedy some of their problems. So if we can be there with, again, a really helpful, relevant message, that is 100% true, supported by all of the brilliant pharmacists we've got in store, etc. So bringing pharmacists onto the TikTok platform has been super interesting for us. It's almost, how do we cut through with that credible, trusted voice in a world that's starting to get, full of misinformation, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from our perspective, there's been a lot of focus on YouTube as well for those younger audiences, and I think it's almost checking our own maybe biases from a few years back, and like the quality of content that you can get on YouTube. This is like high production stuff now. It's not just the user-generated content. There's some really like awesome stuff on there. So I think sometimes reminding brands and marketers that there's high quality things that we can do, so potentially a premium YouTube buy. Of course, as you said, like not all YouTube is equal. So I think understanding and getting really into sort of things like the YouTube API, working with partners that can really sift through that, so you get brand safety as a pre-note, brand suitability, so where it's relevant, but also just quality premium content. I think that can be a really nice way to tap into those younger audiences. So I speak to my little cousins, nephews, nieces, and they just watch YouTube. They're just constantly there. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing, and to build on top of the TikTok stuff.
I have another question. Just in the speaking to the theme of today, which is creativity. Says, I work for an FMCG brand, and we don't feel our media agency and our creative agency talk to each other enough. How would you recommend we get them to collaborate together better? Perhaps Amy, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's huge onus on the client there to make that relationship better. So for example, it's as simple as face-to-face all agency briefings. You're all in the same room. Everyone is hearing the same message from the client at the same time. And the worst thing you can do is creative and media get briefed separately on different days. And that's the worst thing. So face-to-face, the client bringing everyone together is number one. And sort of forcing their hand a little bit to work on projects. So perhaps stuff out of the day-to-day briefs that they wouldn't normally work on, that is, hey, we've got a challenge. Agencies collaboratively come together and solve this challenge for us. I think are really nice ways that we've got the agencies working together.
Anything, on your end?
Yeah, I guess, I suppose traditionally we sit more at closer to the executional side of things when you're actually activating the campaign. So I think we see the creative process as almost like this sort of linear thing where you have the creative agency and the advertiser making the ads, and then it sort of just flows through and it comes to us at the end. I think we have a responsibility as well of also just informing our clients and creative agencies about the vehicles that ultimately you can use on a digital perspective to show the ads, ultimately where the consumers are going to see the ads. So what I mean by that is like a creative agency should know you can add an overlay to a CTV ad. You can build augmented reality into the final ads that you show. You can have these, build a game within an ad unit. That shouldn't really come at the end. I think if we were able to tell creative agencies that might inspire some of those things, because I think at the moment maybe we take assets that are already built and we try to put them into these really cool units that we can now serve ads to consumers with. So that's one element. I think that we have a responsibility to feedback what's actually possible. I think there's also just data effectiveness, like the data on like what's actually working. So minimum A/B testing certain creatives. So you give something back to the creative agency. If you're running DCO, there's all these like new AI kind of creative evaluation things that you can do. Is the logo best in the top left corner or the bottom right corner? Is it better when it's someone smiling using the product or a big product shot? All these kind of things we can start to get data on. So I think it's our responsibility as well to feed that data back to kind of close the loop.
Just made me think of something there, actually. I think it's important we give time to do that. So that all takes time.
Yeah,
and what we've started doing, briefing earlier, and then also allowing a time between, a shoot happening, campaign going live. There's a period of time where we would get together with you guys at MIQ, would have creative and media agency all in the same room. Media agency saying, right, we've put this partner on the plan for this reason. They've got this amazing new format. Creative agency, how can you deliver the best in class? And we've put that process in, so it takes a bit more time, but we're massively seeing the results of that in terms of creative fit for platform. Yeah.
You sound like a dream client, can I just say? So just a small build, like we've all been there when it's not working, and it's a horrible feeling on both sides. It really is, and it's not good for the client because you've got people competing over things that don't matter. So I think sometimes it's useful to have, if you're in that situation, be honest, have a come to Jesus moment and say we need to get better. I think simple things like a KPI structure. So are your agencies bonus to deliver collaboration? I know that's what everyone will listen then. And I think you can engage the senior team, so not just the people working in the day-to-day, but their bosses and bosses' bosses to have a relationship too, and make sure that in QBR sessions, everyone has a role to play, and indeed on those collaborative moments that we're going to respond to together, that there's a clear RACI, so everyone feels that they're contributing and has a role to play, and that one agency therefore can't feel like they're leading or bossing around the other one a little bit.
It's when first half of the deck is one agency, they said, right, we're going to swap to the other computer now and plug in the other laptop. And you think, this isn't come together.
No, yeah, that's a nightmare.
We still have a few minutes. Any other questions? Yeah, we've got one right here. Sorry, we'll come back to the back corner after.
Yes, yeah.
Hi there. So one of the questions I had was, you said $500,000, that's a low budget. For some brands who are really starting out, even $500,000 is a heck of a lot of money.
No, it is, of course. Yeah.
And no. So almost, like I come from I'm an accountant, but with marketing background. And I'm almost like, there are a lot of people who, I'm speaking to finance peers who are like, oh my God, $500,000, and what are we going to get with that? Mm-hmm. Also, as we're moving to cookieless, it's almost like, how are you going to show what you're delivering for maybe a £20,000 budget versus how the budget's going to grow and the comparatives? Because you talked about having comparatives year on year.
Yeah.
So it's like the growth of budget versus comparatives. What's been the most effective way of showing that as the brand grows?
So there's a few things in what you said. The first thing is, for me, thresholds. So there's a point of spending too light where you just won't cut through. Right, so that's something we have to advise on, and that's so if you had a 20k situation, if it's a social post or something, that's fine, but we have to be realistic about what that will deliver, because actually, if you're so low, the inventory levels might be too low to measure properly, and then you're even wasting things even more. So I think there's things like, I'm a big fan of incrementality, which gives a good lens on the midterm, right? So when you have a campaign, it will deliver something in the short term, for sure, and a brand campaign will have a short-term impact, and a sales campaign will have a short-term impact. And it's useful to look at metrics, obviously in your own sales data, et cetera, to help see what that is like week on week. And then there's a mid-place, which is incrementality, where you can look at things like geofencing, which you've mentioned already, but how do you do that with a view to thinking about having a control area versus an incrementality test and what that's delivering on maybe traffic to site will obviously depend on what your KPI is. That's really useful because then you can isolate what's working and not working and make a case to invest more next time or to broaden that out of a geo. So there's things like that. I mean, it would depend on the situation and the case. The thing that I would try to avoid is burning through the 500 if it was your annual budget, which is cool. Thinking about a way to always have a test and learn approach so that you can make a case for more, because it's easy to do that in a burst. It's easy to burn through 500 and stack in loads of channels and make it really high reach. And then actually, that's your whole ROI for the year has to be delivered in that period. And that can actually yield a negative impact for you making a case for more money next year. So I'd have a definite chat with your agency about the way you can stagger that to prove that things are working, and then go back to your accountants internally and stuff to get more.
I think there was a question in the back there. Or we'll get to both.
Hi, my name is Imada. I work in music brand partnerships. My question is merely on music does so much in growing brands. I want to know from your perspective, do you think brands are doing enough in that music space to create creative campaigns and partnerships within the music industry and their brands as well? Or is it something that you guys think brands should be doing more, and agencies should be working with clients to kind of create those creative campaigns using music, using artists and activations?
I love that. I think it can be quite scary or daunting in times sometimes in the music industry, because it feels like the entry point is quite high, you know, to be associated with license the song, etc. But I think what we're doing well at the moment, so festivals is a massive part of our summer campaign, because naturally the stuff you need to take to a festival, you can get most of it from Boots, that's a plug there. And so it would kind of be stupid to miss that audience. So we definitely want to align with those moments and show up in the right way. We just have to get around that, and perhaps it's a wrong challenge to have, but the cost of being associated with some of these massive artists and license some of the tracks is huge. I think you have to be a bit creative and get around it, but I'd love to push it a bit further, because I think we also default to the likes of Spotify, YouTube. That's kind of default place to go in terms of, okay, I want to align with a music-loving audience, but if there are other places, I think we should certainly explore them.
Yeah, there's a brand that we work with. It's a very traditional, old school sort of like Asian sauce brand. And they had this like heritage audience that are a bit more traditional, but they partnered with, I think it was Big Zoo. So like it's got inherently this audience that he's already associated with. And they made this rap about an Asian sauce, which was a bit of a bizarre kind of connection, but suddenly you kind of tap into that audience. So, you know, we're not the ones defining those strategies, but I thought it was really cool. It's a really nice vehicle to kind of push on YouTube and digital audio, that kind of thing. Yeah, that was cool.
I think there's just one last question in the back that I wanted to get to.
Hi there, I'm Nikki from Narrative. I just wanted to ask, so we're obsessed with the programmatic display space. We own an interactive programmatic ad unit that we're literally trying to solve the attention problem in this space, right? So I just wanted to know, have your strategies changed in terms of how you're showing up in programmatic display because of the current challenges that a lot of brands are facing? And I'd love to just understand, like, if that part of the funnel where you're now not maybe playing in that space has changed, and where have you almost allocated budget to instead of that? Thanks.
Who wants to take that on first?
Do you mind?
Yeah, do you want
Raj?
Yeah,
Jackie?
So just to reframe what you're saying, so you're asking, in light of attention, how we've pivoted our programmatic strategies?
Yeah, and just because there's obviously so much clutter in that environment, and you've all spoken to that, like how to cut through that clutter, how do you show up where your audience is spending time, and with display there's often, like the attention's just gone down so much.
Yeah, and there's a big long tail, obviously. When you get into the world of programmatic, there's so many sites and so many places you can show up. So I mentioned before, but Havas are a Lumen partner. So for us, the eye tracking data is really, really valuable in this space. And so we've built marketplaces, for example, which using the Lumen tags, we can start to see the dwell time on different formats, different sites. There's like 32 billion different data sets or something that are used to build a higher quality marketplace. That means instead of having to worry about it, our clients can just choose to buy into that marketplace, and the data has allocated the budget to the right sites. We also work closely with Teads and MIQ and partners like that to go a step deeper. So in that case, we might start looking at, for different brands, what are the formats that are performing well within that. So it could be an MPU, or it could be news content, like the site and context and parts of sites. You might have things like we're looking at like combinations of DCO and what like words are driving better attention. So we can start to get into real granular learnings about that. So the big thing I'd say is you need a client who's on that journey. So there's no point in us waving a Lumen logo around in a set of slides unless the client's willing to go and help us test and unpick what bits of that programmatic puzzle are working best for them.
I think we'll have to leave it there. This clock is flashing at me. I hope you've all found this really useful. I found it really fun. Hopefully a good way to wake up in the morning. So thank you so much, and give a big round of applause.